A lot of older people really like to move out of town. But the problem is then you start having health issues as well.
Yeah.
And how far are you from those services if you had a medical emergency? Sounds good to be 30 miles out of town, all this quiet and peacefulness, but you're also 30 minutes from any help. Well, I always have people that say, I love to live in the county because I can do whatever I want to with my property. And I always tell them, but your neighbors can do whatever they want to with their property too. A lot of people want to build this majestic, gorgeous house with these perfect views. And that's a great dream. But if you are sitting in the middle of a bunch of undeveloped land and it's being sold off, who's going to buy that?
The Den, powered by the Lions Group, a show that explores trending topics in real estate, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. We're a small team of professionals with over $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 successful transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. And today we're going to be talking about all things rural outside of the city. That's kind of a hard word to say. Rural?
Yeah, you're taking a risk with this one.
But before I get into that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of The Den. To my right, Paul, Hammy the Rockberry, Aspen the Ninja Gruin, and the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez. My name is Ben Clampett Lyons. And if you don't know who the Clampetts are, the Beverly Hillbillies back then, coming from the rural parts of I'm very much rural. A little bit of redneck in me. But you're probably too young for that, Aspen, aren't you?
No, I watched that.
Did you watch the Hillbillies?
Did watch that.
Beverly Hillbillies? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I remember the Clampetts. Paul, we're still reliving that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. But today we're going to talk about rural buying, things you should consider before buying in the country. I was going to look up some stats to find out actually how much of America is considered rural. But I would imagine, you ladies, let me know your thoughts. Wouldn't it be the majority of America is outside the city limits of a municipality? Obviously land-wise, yes, but population-wise?
Population-wise,
probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But land-wise, definitely.
Yeah. So a lot of purchases happen in rural properties. And today we need to consider, what are some of the things you should think about? Paul, coming to you first and foremost, if you're working with a client and they want to buy a rural property, what are some of the things you discuss? Why don't you pick out one in particular and we'll talk about it?
Septic, water, propane. What do you want?
Pick out one that you would talk to them. Let's just say a first-time home buyer.
Utilities in general, probably.
Utilities, I think, is the hardest part because if they're not all, it's not like living in town where everything's just one bill and it all just comes no matter what.
It's just stubbed into your house.
Right. Yeah. So, in a rural area, that's going to be a hard one to say over and over again. Outside of the city limits, you have propane, which everybody thinks is more expensive, depending on who you go to. Could be more expensive, could be less expensive. Water, you have not always city water. You could have community water. You could have wells. Irrigation usually comes with those properties. Septic versus city sewer system. Those are all things to consider. The electric could cost a little bit more because you have to run the lines a little bit further out. Yeah, rural areas or zoning is another big one.
Yeah. But let's stop right there. Let's talk a little bit about the utilities.
Yeah, focus this question.
Yeah, focusing the question on the utilities. So what would a buyer be thinking about? Should they think about with a community water users association or a well? What's the difference or how would that impact them versus normal city water?
It's usually less expensive. All water associations, city water, they all have to be tested at a certain frequency to make sure that it's drinkable water, potable water. Usually city water, and I know city water, you have to water your grass and all of that kind of stuff. It can be pretty expensive in the summer. Community water usually costs less. It's not typically only based on usage like it is in the city. They have annual fees. A well, there are many different types of well, but the well for potable water is, they call it a domestic well. Those usually have to be registered, permitted, all those types of things.
Yeah. And the flow rate, right?
Flow rates,
Because you could you could have a well, you're on well water's good, but then it runs dry. So you go, use them for your house, great. But then you add a little garden out back and things like that. All of a sudden you're pumping a dry well. That's a consideration.
One thing in this area with wells is really hard water.
Yeah, the minerals.
Yeah.
The iron is really high here.
And it wreaks havoc on your appliances.
And sometimes you have to go shoot a shotgun down the well to break it all.
Does that come from experience, Aspen?
Yeah, it does actually.
Yeah.
You can. Yeah.
Go down there and shoot a shotgun to clear it out a little bit.
Otherwise they're going to charge you like $850 to do it. You can just go take care of it yourself.
You got to be prepared to be a little redneck if you live in the country.
That's what I'm saying. You got to have a little redneck in you. It's all right.
And something people don't think about too is a lot of these older properties that are in the country, homesteaders or grandma and grandpa put them together and may have done some things that weren't really smart, like maybe put that well kind of close to your septic leach field.
Yeah.
And now you're watering your lawn with,
buried tanks for like water storage. And
yeah. When I shared this on a previous episode, but I remember being a kid and my uncle dug a pit and put like a V-dub bus in the back and then stuck a pipe in the back of it. And I was like, wow, that's weird. Does this have a new playhouse? And no, it's a septic, at the baffle wall with the seats in the middle. And I mean, there's some janky things out there, but back to the water component, community water systems, just for our audience, anytime you're outside of the municipality, what happens is typically they come together and they say, look, we all live out here north of the municipality. We need drinking water. Let's create an association that has potable water. Like you said, follows the rules of the New Mexico Environmental Department or wherever, whatever jurisdiction you're in. And we're going to get tested, make sure this water is good, but we're going to run a line out to all these different properties that are outside of the municipality for drinking water. Now, some of them do really well. There's actually an association here locally, North Star, that is arguably better than the municipal water. I mean, they're big. Now at this point, and they have a big network, very well ran. But then you do have others. Remember Cedar Hill had a water users association that actually went defunct. The water wasn't good. They didn't run it right. And so, those are considerations if you're looking to purchase in a rural area. You need to be thinking about that. And of course, the well, you had to have a shotgun on hand. And
expense right there.
There you go. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about road maintenance. Is road maintenance a concern, Shannon?
Very much so.
And why would it be a concern?
Well, it's first the concern is for the lender. If you are on a road that is not maintained by the city or the county, then there has to be some agreement in place that says the people of that road are going to maintain it, because the bank's not going to want to lend on a property that's going to be impassable at some point. So that's one issue. But you consider, a lot of those people that live out in the country, they probably have some tractors and a drag and a couple things they can keep the road up on, but not everyone may. And if you're living on a long road, maybe by yourself or just one other neighbor, and you realize that you've got to be responsible for keeping that road maintained and drivable at all times, that could be a big cost or a big problem for someone that may not have those skills and the equipment to do something like that.
Hi, this is Aspen Gruen. I'm a partner at the Lions Group. We're dedicated to making your real estate experience the best it can be. If you're looking to buy or sell, go to sjcbroker.com and watch our informational video series. These videos break down the process and shed some light on buying or selling. While you're there, schedule a private consultation with one of our partners. We'd love to sit down, talk strategy, and give you a real advantage in today's market. You deserve the best, so take those steps, and we'll see you soon. Now back to the show.
And we have the benefit of having a lot of oil and gas companies that do a lot of maintenance on these roads.
They do.
And some are, we have different colored signs. So one colored sign says county maintained road. Another colored sign says this county road is not maintained. And so you and the neighbors are responsible for, if it's big snow, people can't get up their driveways.
Yeah, the city's not coming with a salt truck like they do in Farmington.
We see that in Colorado a lot, and it's a lot of handshake. Oh yeah, Bill takes care of the road. It's like, well, what if Bill sells the house and Bill's not doing it anymore?
What if Bill has an accident and can't get on his tractor?
Or gets older, who knows, or moves to lower elevation?
That's right.
then who's going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the good old boy handshake system probably works for a lot of people, but there's going to be times when it does not work.
Yeah. I think that's why you see more and more lenders requiring there be something in place. They don't want a loan on a property that they think.
And as a buyer, you probably want that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a lot of road maintenance agreements out there that aren't recorded. That's one of the key things, is a recorded agreement. I had one a few years back. There was a VA loan. They were at the very end of Knickerbocker subdivision.
What a name.
Yeah.
And you have to go all the way out to the nearest paved road. So we had to go and do 200 signatures. So by the time we start, once we were about to start, the neighbor right up across the way just says, I'll sign it. I'll do the whole thing. I agree, and we'll record it that he'll do the whole thing.
Wow.
So he said, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, done. Wow. Mm-hmm. Knickerbocker. I haven't heard a fun name like that in a long time.
Right?
You don't know where that is?
I do now. I just forgot about the Knickerbocker. Yeah.
I have a road maintenance agreement conversation I just recently had. I have a couple of customers, their parents actually developed a subdivision, and the parents have passed away. And so the sons right now at this point are trying to sell off the last couple pieces of land that are out there. And I grabbed the road maintenance agreement because I'd had it from a few other places I'd sold out in that subdivision. And one of the sons was reading it. I gave it to him to make sure he had covenants and all the agreements before we listed it. And he noticed that the agreement actually said that it would be maintained by the developers, which were the parents, or their heirs.
Oh,
and he said,
she's
okay,
on the hook.
Yeah, he's like, well, they're dead. And I never agreed to that. And I said, well, we might just have to get a new road maintenance agreement with the neighbors involved for the next sale. Because obviously, he said, I'm selling. I'm not going to, for all eternity, be responsible for this subdivision road that my parents put together. He's like, I don't understand how that even could have.
Sells and moves out.
Yeah, like how could that language have even gone in there? I don't know how that language could have even gone in there.
Yeah,
but it does.
Paid HOA that would maintain it just for the road.
Yeah.
Because we see that a lot in Colorado, is because there is so much snow there. It needs to be graded. Yeah, you can't just be like, you're going to do this for free.
Forever.
For eternity. Yeah. Because your parents decided they were going to. And I'm sure they didn't do that. Somehow that language got in there by an attorney or someone that crafted it, a title company. Somebody did this for them for their first sale, probably along the way. And it's worked for every sale. But at this point, the sons are going, well, but we're
not doing that.
Yeah. This is the first time we've seen this. This is the first property we've had out here, and I'm trying to figure out how they do that. And I said, well, maybe you need to talk to an attorney, or maybe we need to get a new road maintenance agreement in order, with the people that are staying here involved.
Yeah. But, could you imagine just forever their kids are doing it, their grandkids, it's like, oh, yep, we just take care of that road.
Yep. No, you just call these guys and they just show up with another thing of gravel for us anytime we need it. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just snow and then a bumpy road. You could have big rains that wash a section.
That wash it out. Yeah.
Wash a section of the road.
Could require a culvert, could require major work.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, what about considerations of like proximity to the fire department? I mean, there are considerations for that with lenders.
Insurance could be higher. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? What have we ran into?
Insurance a little bit higher, just because, you're not going to get, if you're sitting on Main Street and your house catches on fire and you call 911 within the first 10 minutes, chances are pretty good somebody's going to be there pretty quickly. But out there, if you're 30, 40 minutes away from any things, insurance could be a problem. But you also got to consider a lot of older people really like to move out of town. But the problem is then you start having health issues as well. Yeah. And how far are you from those services if you had a medical emergency? That's a lot of things that I find older clients thinking about and talking about. And that's a really smart thing to think about. Sounds good to be 30 miles out of town, all this quiet and peacefulness, but you're also 30 minutes from any help.
Yeah.
I don't know if this has been your experience too, but more accidents are probably going to happen if you're working with bigger equipment and you're doing more outside and you're having to cut down trees and it's more opportunity for accidents as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then you also get in a more rural setting and you have more trees and you've got things like that where the insurance company is going to start flagging you for fire hazards and potential drainage issues, floodplain designations, things like that. Now that can happen in any municipality as well, but you may find a beautiful spot next to an arroyo and find out that arroyo is in a FEMA flood map. And then, you've got an elevated insurance premium. But beyond just the lender components, Shannon, to your point, the just being near services, if something were to happen to you, if you fell off the tractor or you were up on a ladder with a chainsaw and an extension rod. Sounds like something you and I would do, Paul. Like hold the bottom of this ladder. I've got the chainsaw on a rod,
right?
I mean, you are facing some serious issues if you get hurt and you're 30 miles away from any services. So things to consider. Absolutely. What about other things like a survey? A lot of people just still do improvement location reports, in which for our audience, just to understand the difference between an improvement location report and a survey is an ILR, improvement location report, is actually meant for the lender. The lender gets kind of an aerial, and then the surveyor goes out and just does a quick check and says, hey, there doesn't appear to have any encroachments. Everything seems to be okay, but this is not a staked survey. And so there's not much of a guarantee there.
But in a lot and block subdivision, really what more do you need? The fences have been up for, sometimes 20, 50 years. Maybe they're off a few inches, but you really aren't losing or gaining much land if they're inches off in a small, less than a quarter acre lot in town.
Yeah. And you can look down the row of houses and see where everyone's fences are and say, okay, it's reasonable to expect that's where your lot line is. Out in a rural setting, I think that pin is over by that third tree, across the arroyo. And then you go to put up a fence, and then your neighbor Fred shows up and says, oh, no, that's not the case. So do you all advocate for a survey out in rural America when you're selling a property?
Sometimes if there's not neighbors and fence lines you can see in the ILRs, just, not going to be sufficient. I mean, we had one experience where we actually had, a manufactured home that was sitting, the corner of it was over the line on somebody else's property.
That's what I was going to say. I had one that was in the center of the house.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're just guessing, and you want to, let's put the house over in this corner, and then we've got all this acreage for animals and yard and stuff. And you don't really know where those pins are.
Yeah.
It happens more in the country.
I found a whole subdivision that's 90 feet off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that up there next to the Knickerbocker subdivision?
It's on the far other side in Fruitland.
Wow.
On the way to the power plant.
90 feet off. That's pretty significant.
Yeah. So we tried to sell some property out there, and no lawyers wanted to touch it because people have been there for 30 years and now everything's off. So you had to either resurvey the entire subdivision, or just, I guess that would be the only way to do it. Or just accept that your house is in the middle of somebody else's property.
Wow. I wonder how a lender views that now that they
won't lend on it. That's
that's
the problem. Yeah. That's where the problem lies.
So there's a difference. So staked surveys are when it's first surveyed. So then we go into like flagging the corners. That's one of the things in a rural area that I always advocate for. And then an ILR is just like you were saying, a lot and block.
Yeah. And great thank you for the distinction. Like a boundary survey is just reflagging the corners. Yeah. Staked survey, is going out and doing it for the first time. And you may have surveyors that disagree. Some surveyors are like, no, that pin's not right. My pin's right. And you see that. Surveyors have egos. And, much like realtors and attorneys.
It also just depends. Like whenever I bought my 10 acres out on the river, it was pretty obvious to tell where the lines were, because on it was like the river, the road, and then on either side, it was like ranchers. So they already had the fence lines. They already had these things pretty established. And it was like looking at aerial map. It's like, okay, that's about right.
That's what I'm saying. Sometimes if it's obvious.
But whenever I sold it, we split it in half. And I was like, no, we need to know exact, because it's not obvious, because it was kind of like cornered out too for a pond, and I did not want this one cottonwood tree on my side. So I was like, that needs to stay on this side. So in that case, I was like, we have to have a flagged marked survey, even though we didn't have to. In my mind, it was an expensive necessity.
Yeah. It's like a survey line that goes straight and then goes woo, 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 woo around the tree and then goes.
It was just like for the road, because it was also weird because like a neighbor owned part of the road, but then the other road was county road. I don't know how that happened, probably 50 years ago. But so we had to have it like catty corner off the side road that's owned by the county, not off the one that's owned by the neighbor. Or we wouldn't be able to put a road in. There was a lot of stuff that came up during the survey that was good to know.
Things to think about for sure.
Well, and two, with surveys, like if you're going to split off a portion of your property and you get a new survey, one of the things that I ran into a few times was people would record the survey, but wouldn't get a new deed for the property. So now there's two separate deeds. So when you sell it, you can actually transfer the deed. So, and the county and the title companies don't ever talk about that. And you only find out when you're trying to close on it and you go, well, we don't have a deed. So this is going to take a lot longer.
Yeah. Or people don't record their surveys. Their survey's been done. Many surveys have been done and they're not recorded. So no one knows that easement is there or that right away or whatever else has happened. And until you really start digging, and hopefully they have a copy of it, they still hold on to that hard copy. And oftentimes it's hard to track that stuff down. What about zoning? Any thoughts or considerations on zoning?
Well, I always have people that say, I love to live in the county because I can do whatever I want to with my property. And I always tell them, but your neighbors can do whatever they want to with their property too. And that's something to consider. A lot of people want to build maybe this, majestic, gorgeous house with these perfect views. And that's a great dream. But if you are sitting in the middle of a bunch of undeveloped land and it's being sold off, who's going to buy that?
And the neighbor works on cars.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you don't know who's going to buy that and what they're going to do with it. And they can do whatever they want with their property, just like you can. And that's something really to consider. Yeah.
Now the county's been kind of pushing in the arena of some forms of zoning to stop just willy-nilliness. Willy-nilly, hey, that's a new word.
I don't think it's a word.
It's not new, just word. Grandpas use it.
Yeah. What did he use in the last one? Curmudgeons.
Curmudgeons, yeah. Cantankerous.
That's what it was.
So willy-nilliness, the county's trying to push back on some of the willy-nilliness. But you could, in essence, you could have this big, beautiful home, someone buy the property next to you and they start putting in a gravel pit, and then you've got equipment and machinery going. And
they're living in a camper with their 12 goats. And that's your view now.
Hey, but there'd be no weeds out there,
right? That's true.
Yeah. So there is some consideration there. Have you all experienced any of that happening, or have you seen the county taking some steps in that regard?
Well, not so much. I know they try to, keep the weeds down, and they have like compliance officers with the city. But I think mostly the planning and zoning try to not make it checkerboard. They kind of keep residential with residential, commercial with commercial. That way, a lot of that stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, a little more thought is put into it.
Yeah. We're not necessarily in this area master planned city, but I think they've done a decent job of keeping. We have a whole mixed use area. They're right down down Main Street, right where we're at. And sometimes you have a business, a house. But for the most part, this town is kind of segregated that way.
Yeah, and that's done thoughtfully, though.
Yeah.
They want a mixed use, so you can allow for a business to operate on the lower level and an apartment on the upper level, give some versatility to the development there. But yeah, on the county, we've seen some pretty incredible things, and it can hurt your value if you don't know what those neighbors are planning on doing, or you're next to a bunch of little parcels that have been sold off. You may want to do a little bit more digging on is there any covenants? Are there any restrictions that we need to be looking at? Access to BLM is another thing to think about. That's a big amenity for a lot of people. BLM is our land to use according to the rules and guidelines that are set forth, but the BLM is a great amenity for a lot of people that ride horses, have side-by-sides, ATVs, UTVs, want to walk the trails. But you also have to be aware as well that other people get to access that amenity, and they may be crossing your road to get to that. There may be easements involved and whatnot. So interesting conversation in that regard. Anything else to consider as far as rural properties. As far as lending is concerned, there's some great loan programs out there for people to develop. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. Aspen, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get a USDA loan is like one of the biggest perks, which is 0% down. I mean, that's very appealing
and
to a lot of
sometimes
people.
over 100% of the appraised value.
It's a very appealing loan to people. I'm not a lender, so that's all I can say on it.
So USDA, it's not like a USDA stake or anything like that. It's actually a USDA.
Is it like similar? I have no idea. It's like when you hear like Michelin tires and the Michelin Guide, complete opposite things, but same company.
Yeah. You don't want to chew on a tire.
Same company though.
But you do are opposites.
Yeah, but you do want to go to a restaurant that has a Michelin star. The USDA is a fantastic loan. And I'm glad you brought that up, but it is a zero down product. And the push was to help development in rural areas. So they're a lot more lenient on their lending guidelines and the ability to have a zero down loan. You can ask the seller to contribute to your closing costs. So in essence, we've seen buyers get into homes less than $1,000 just by buying outside of the city limits, which is pretty incredible.
There's even some parts here in the city that qualify for USD loans because it's just crazy. I had one. It was like right by Dustin, like down in that neighborhood, and got a USDA loan.
Qualified for a USDA loan.
Yep,
wow.
Crazy.
That's pretty incredible.
Happened to just be like, and they weren't going into it with that intention at all. And then the lender was like, we can do USDA on this. And that's what they did.
Yeah. Wow. Why not take that opportunity?
Yeah. They got into it for under $500. It was wild.
Yeah. And the converse of that is like, if you are doing an FHA loan, even some conventional, they are a little bit more stricter on the road maintenance agreements. They want to find out some of that information, your proximity to fire stations and emergency services. And then of course, insurance is becoming a little bit of a pain.
A problem.
We may have to dedicate an entire episode on insurance, not to bore you to death, but actually it's pretty fascinating on how they approach insurance nowadays. And there's been a lot of cancellations, there've been a lot of problems, and it is probably something we need to put on the list to talk about.
I think it's also important just for people to know, because this is becoming an issue and you need to be staying involved with this. Just as someone who lives in any area, it seems to be. It doesn't seem to be any area has been
immune from
it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you can get a cancellation letter at any time too. They could change their rules and all of a sudden you're not insured.
Yeah. We just had that happen. A lady helped her father buy a house just down the road from her. Both have the same insurance companies. Father got a cancellation notice. Hey, we're not going to insure you. Same insurance company. And she called him and said, what's the deal? And they said, well, fire risk. And she said,
your letter's on the way.
Yeah. She said, I have.
We forgot you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks for calling. She said, I have more trees than he does, and they haven't canceled her. So it's just pretty random how they do that. So, but we'll dedicate a whole episode to that. The buying in a rural area can have its benefits, but it can also have its drawbacks, things to consider for you before purchasing in a rural area. Hopefully we shed some light on that and had some good conversations about that. Thank you for that. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. We enjoy spending some time discussing and peeling back the layers on some of these topics. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, you can go to our Facebook page, but more importantly, go to sjcbroker.com and schedule a private consultation with any one of the partners here at the Lions Group. We'd love to sit down with you, whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial. We can give you an advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den, powered by the Lions Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed and check the show notes below for direct links to our buyer and seller video series. The buyer and seller video series can give you an inside track on taking the right steps in real estate. If you'd like to learn more about the Lions Group or to schedule a consultation, go to sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lions Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.